Republican lawmakers are demanding answers from Joe Biden's inner circle amid growing accusations that they covered up his cognitive decline. The House Oversight Committee sent letters to the former president's physician and White House aides on Thursday, requesting they appear for transcribed interviews. The investigation comes in the wake of this week's release of a tell-all book by journalists Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson that details the lengths to which those closest to Biden went to keep his decline a secret. One political insider told the authors that, quote, 5 people were running the country, and Joe Biden was at best a senior member of the board. This also comes in the wake of the announcement last weekend that the former president has been diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer. So let's bring in our panel, longtime Wall Street Journal editor and columnist Dan Henninger, columnist and Manhattan Institute senior fellow Jason Riley, and editorial board member Kyle Peterson. Gentlemen, welcome. So Dan, let me start with you. This revelation about first of all, we should say that the former president, as we know, is diagnosed with prostate cancer. We wish him all the best. That's a horrible diagnosis, and we can only wish him well. What does it tell us? Does it tell us any more about this, what we're learning now about the extent to which his aides went to and some of the media went, let's be honest as well, to cover up the President Biden's condition in the last few years?
I think it tells us a lot, Jerry, about the politics and the political goals of the Democratic Party, which I think we are now discovering transcended even Joe Biden's presidency itself. I mean, the reality is, if Joe Biden had stepped aside back then, his legacy would have been that he was, in Democratic terms, a perfectly respectable Democratic president, passed a lot of legislation, pro-climate legislation. Instead, his legacy is this personal catastrophe. That's how he'll be remembered. But if, in fact, 5 people were running the presidency, they had a willing sort of man standing there in Joe Biden who would open the door for all of these progressive things that the White House was doing domestically. And they had a goal in mind. They wanted to get as much done in terms of progressive politics as they could during those 4 years, and they had a situation that allowed them to do it. The country be damned.
Jason, there's another quote in the book which I read this week where it says that, essentially I'm paraphrasing, but that the aim was simply to get through the election, to get Joe Biden through the election, and then he could largely disappear over the next 4 years. He would just appear every now and then to show proof of life while the rest of them went on running the country. It really does create an additional trust problem for Democrats, doesn't it, that they took part in this obvious attempt, as Dan says, to push ahead with their policies, frankly, irrespective of whoever the president was and what condition he was in.
Well, first, thank you for reading the book, so I don't have to. But you're right, there is a trust issue here, and the bottom line is, why should we trust what Democrats are telling us today? There's a connection between this cancer diagnosis and what was going on with Biden cognitively for many years while this was being covered up. There were plenty of opportunities for the Democrats to pivot on this. I'm thinking back to that Robert Hur report, the special counsel that was looking into Biden's handling of classified documents, issued a report back in, I believe it was early 2024, came back and said they saw the transcript for this. So Democrats knew. They knew back then. They didn't want the audio released because they knew how damning it would be. Congressmen knew, the cabinet knew, Vice President Kamala Harris obviously knew, Joe Biden knew. And they thought that if they spoke out about this, if they moved on this, it would help Donald Trump. And that's why they kept it to themselves. But it ended up helping Donald Trump in the long run and blowing up in their face in the worst possible way. And now they have a serious trust issue with all Americans, not just Republicans, but I think all Americans.
Kyle, this latest book raises questions not only about the White House and Democrats covering it up, but actually, to some extent, many members of the media, if not collaborating in the cover-up, then at least lacking curiosity to really push very hard on this. And I think some people regard it as kind of an act of chutzpah that one of the people who wrote this latest book, Jake Tapper of CNN, not so much Alex Thompson, who I think did some good reporting on Biden's condition, but Jake Tapper was one of those people who did actually quite often criticize people who were reporting on the president's condition. Is the media responsible as well here? Were they colluding in this cover-up?
Sure. I think a lack of curiosity is a great way to put it. I mean, voters saw the condition that Biden was in. He started taking the short stairs off of Air Force One. He was wearing tennis shoes instead of dress shoes. And the White House dismissed those questions, laughed them off essentially. And many people, including, I think, Jake Tapper and CNN, people in the mainstream press, were eager to believe that White House line that the president was okay. And I think that is a big part of the problem here. One of the questions that is now on people's minds is, what price are the Democrats going to pay for this? And I tend to think that 3-4 years is a pretty long time for voters to have other things on their minds. On the other hand, there will be questions, I think, in 2028 for people who are in the cabinet in the Biden White House, like Pete Buttigieg, if he is to run, about what they saw, what they witnessed, and why didn't they say anything?
Dan, do you think there's any possibility that there will be some form of at least political accountability? We're going to see, the members, the Republican leaders in Congress are calling for these inquiries, this investigation into what people knew. Do you think there'll be a political accountability for people who engage in this cover-up?
I think it's always a question of how independent voters are going to swing, since the partisans and the Democrats and Republicans, basically their ideas are set. And the question is, will independent voters feel like they were had by the Democratic Party, that they can no longer trust what they are saying? But this was an enormous event, Jerry. I mean, this biggest thing since Woodrow Wilson, to allow a cognitively impaired president to be in power for that many years, while people who were unelected were running the government. And I think a lot of voters are going to be upset about that if the Republicans remind them of it.
As you say, it's a good point that, we have obviously seen this before. You said Woodrow Wilson, FDR was famous in a wheelchair. JFK was, sort of quite seriously ill with Addison's disease, much of his presidency. But I think in an age of public disclosure where we're so used to it, that is no longer acceptable. And I'm sure there's a sense that there needs to be accountability.
Hey, it's Will Kane. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News channel on YouTube. It's the best way to get our latest interviews and highlights. And click to subscribe to the Will Kane podcast for full episodes right now.